The first time I walked into a dairy barn outside Mount Hope in Holmes County, Ohio, it was August. I expected noise. I expected motors, belts, compressors, and the hard metallic hum you hear in almost every modern building once the heat starts rising. What I found instead changed something in me. The air felt cool first, not cold, alive. I could smell dry hay, old pine, and lime dust. Sunlight cut through the loft boards in long gold bands. I heard leather, hooves, and wind moving somewhere above me. I stood there for 11 minutes looking for the fan. It was not there. And that was when I understood I had been wrong about everything. What changed me was simple. The roof itself was doing work. Heat was climbing, pressure was shifting. Moving air was turning a turbine that could charge a battery without asking the grid for permission. No gasoline, no compressor, no monthly bill, just height, temperature, wind, and a shape that looked too ordinary to matter. I remember looking up at the cupola and feeling embarrassed. You know that feeling. It hits when something obvious stands in front of you and you realize you were trained not to see it. The louvers were warm on one side, cool on the other. The shadow line under the cap was moving. Dust lifted, then vanished. Every clue was physical. Every clue was measurable. I walked outside and stood on the gravel. The sun was punishing. My truck door burned my hand. The thermometer clipped to my bag read 94 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade and 117 degrees at the black roof surface. Then I stepped back inside that loft and felt the difference across my face, chest, and arms. Not imagined, not romantic, a pressure change, a heat change, a real one. I kept waiting for the trick. I looked for buried conduit. I looked for a hidden fan. I looked for a modern unit tucked behind a wall or under a bench. Nothing, just an old geometry doing what old geometry has always done when builders respect air, sun, and gravity. That was the moment the title of this video started forming in my head. Because once you understand what is happening, you stop calling electricity only what comes through a wire from a utility. You start seeing usable energy everywhere. In roof heat, in pressure difference, in temperature spread, in wind speed, in a spinning vent, in a shaft that tops up a battery, in the same movement stripping heat from the structure below it. I've been going back to Holmes County every autumn for 3 years. And every time I find something the building industry forgot on purpose. Here is the promise. By the end of this video, you will understand the system. A roof opening, a vent path, and an 18-watt generator can pull heat out and make usable power together. And yes, this works if your house was built 50 years ago. It works if you live in a city. It works if you've never done this before. Stay with me, because what I found in Holmes County uses the same physics the Persians used. They cooled desert towers with it more than 1,500 years ago. And before you roll your eyes at the number, hear me out. 18 watts sounds tiny if you think like a utility bill. It sounds enormous if you think like a resilient house. 18 watts keeps LED lights on all night. It charges radios, phones, weather sensors, cameras, fence alarms, routers, and battery packs. More important, the same motion that makes those watts is already doing the bigger job. It is lowering the thermal stress inside the building shell before your expensive equipment ever turns on. That is the part almost nobody explains. The value is not just the wattage. The value is the sequence. First, you stop the roof from becoming a giant iron skillet over your ceiling. Second, you vent heat using pressure you did not pay for. Third, if you want to, you skim a little electricity off the motion that process already creates. That is why this is not a toy. It is a roof detail with 3 jobs. When I dug through the building science, Oak Ridge National Laboratory gave me the missing piece. In a roof and attic system report, Bill Miller put it plainly. Heat that would have gone into the house is carried up and out. No moving parts. Guaranteed to work. That line matters. Then the numbers hit harder. A 2010 ASHRAE paper from Oak Ridge National Laboratory gave the hard number. Roof assemblies with ventilated air spaces and reflective layers showed summer heat gains 37.6% lower than the direct-nailed control roof. One roof deck assembly ran 32 degrees Fahrenheit cooler around solar noon. On another test day, peak deck heat flow dropped 90% against the control shingle roof. Your body already understands this. When sweat evaporates off your skin, heat leaves with it. A car radiator does the same thing with fins and moving air. This roof trick works by pressure and temperature instead. Hot air rises, wind creates low pressure above the cap, the vent turns, the house stops swallowing its own heat. In equivalent performance terms, you get air movement and even battery charging for every 1 unit of purchased electricity equal to 0. Compare that with a powered attic fan. It often burns 300 to 500 watts just to move hot air you already paid to create. In the generator studies, an 8-inch rooftop ventilator with an axial flux permanent magnet setup reached 17.5 watts at 200 revolutions per minute. A separate roof ventilator study mounted an 18-watt DC generator under a 24-inch ventilator. And if you think the heat side of this sounds too soft to matter, listen to the roof numbers again. 32 degrees cooler at the deck around solar noon. Summer heat gains down 37.6% with a ventilated airspace. In one assembly, peak deck heat flow dropped 90% against the control roof. You do not need perfect conditions to benefit. You need a path. The Department of Energy makes the broader point from another angle. Passive solar design works only after you reduce loads first, then let the building collect, reject, and store heat intelligently. That means the shell comes before the machine. Always. The machine should finish the job, not begin it. Modern houses reverse that order and then act shocked when the bills arrive. So the real coefficient here is not a laboratory trophy. It is a relationship. 1 unit of design removes several units of future equipment burden. 1 vent path cuts run time. 1 shaded intake cuts attic temperature. 1 turning cap gives you airflow first and trickle power second. That gap represents a massive market in equipment, service, and summer fear every year. And that is why you have never heard of this. The living proof was not in a lab. It was in Berlin, Ohio, inside a bank barn, above a milking room where I should have heard machinery and did not. The upper loft felt at least 14 degrees cooler than the blacktop outside. I heard pigeons. I heard leather straps. I heard nothing electrical at all. Ruben told me something I wrote down that day. Hot air wants out. You just give it a clean path. Then he pointed to the ridge, the cupola, and the shaded intake path below the mow floor. His family had built variations of the same airflow path for 4 generations. Before Ohio, that knowledge came through Amish and Mennonite families, carrying practical building habits from the Palatinate, Alsace, and Canton-Bern. That knowledge never disappeared. It was filed away. It was waiting. You can see the paper trail in Farmer's Bulletin number 1393 from the United States Department of Agriculture in 1924. You see it again in Penn State ventilation guidance. It still recommends open ridges, sidewall openings, and roof geometry modern houses keep pretending they invented. I also found the same logic in an April 1920 farm building ventilation circular. The language was blunt. It called it a mistake to install cupolas or aerators alone and expect them to ventilate a barn. Fresh air had to enter low. Foul air had to leave high. The circular specified aerators every 20 to 30 feet of barn length and warned against outtake flues smaller than 12 inches. In other words, the old builders were not guessing. They were measuring. If you go back far enough, you stop calling this a trick. You start calling it memory. In Yazd, Persia, you can still stand under a badgir. It is a wind catcher with inlets on 4 sides. You feel cooler air driven down while hot air escapes upward. The existing towers go back to at least the 14th century, and the written references go back much earlier. Then you move east. In Korea, you find ondol floors carrying heat through masonry. The structure stores and releases comfort slowly instead of fighting the weather every hour. The materials change. The principle does not. You use mass, pressure, height, and flow before you waste fuel. You can cross to Rome next. In the bath complexes, Hippocaust systems pushed hot air under thick floors and through wall flues. The building shell became the machine. Different climate, same lesson, the shell matters first. Every civilization that mastered extreme condition arrived at the same answer independently. The Amish never forgot. They carried it from the Palatinate and Canton Burn to Pennsylvania and Ohio nearly 290 years ago. They kept building it because it worked. They never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. Now you get to the part that should make you angry. The burying of this knowledge did not happen because the physics failed. It happened because comfort became a product line. The origin point sits in plain sight. In 1956, General Electric and Westinghouse decided to co-sponsor the Live Better Electrically campaign and push the medallion home across America. They were protecting electric heating, cooling, and appliance sales, a house that solved part of its own comfort problem with form, shade, venting, and thermal control threatened future equipment sales. That meant thousands of dollars per home. The mechanism was not mysterious. It was paperwork, standards, and marketing stacked together. A SHVE had already written a model ventilation code in 1914. A SHRAE's own history says the expansion of air conditioning in the 1930s made natural ventilation obsolete. By 1925, building codes in 22 states required 30 cubic feet of outdoor air per person. That target was easiest to guarantee with mechanical systems. Then, the 1956 Medallion Home Program wrapped the sales pitch in aspiration. It standardized the all-electric house through ads, badges, model homes, and utility partnerships. The named allies were real. Carrier turned to the Saturday Evening Post, Time, Newsweek, Better Homes and Gardens, and television advertising by 1956. General Electric and Westinghouse backed the national campaign. More than 900 electric utilities and 180 electricity manufacturers supported it. The magazines sold the ads. The utilities sold the kilowatt hours. The manufacturers sold the machines. And once those alliances hardened, house design changed with them. You can watch the transformation in post-war suburbs. Porches shrink, ceiling heights drop, cross-vent windows disappear, deep overhangs give way to bigger glass and thinner walls. The building stops behaving like shelter and starts behaving like a box that needs constant paid correction. Nobody told you. Not your builder, not your contractor, not the man who sold you a bigger unit. By 1951, air conditioning had already become a billion-dollar industry. By 1955, Carrier had become a $200 million business after merging with affiliated gas equipment. Then came the residential push, Levittown contracts, magazine spreads, television spots. The message was relentless. Comfort was no longer something you designed. Comfort was something you bought, replaced, financed, serviced, and upgraded forever. An entire field of knowledge disappeared from architecture schools, builder habits, and code conversations. Not because it failed, because it wasn't profitable. And the continuation is happening right now. In March 2021, the International Code Council changed the IECC development framework, shifting future energy code work toward appointed committees. The New Buildings Institute warned that local governments would lose direct voting power. It also warned that industry interests fight efficiency improvements from inside black box processes. At the same time, trade groups like ACCA kept lobbying to preserve fuel and technology choice. Gas industry playbooks pushed state preemption bills from Florida to Georgia. The motive stays the same: protect equipment sales, protect fuel sales, protect the service economy built around both. The HVAC systems market in the United States was estimated above $31.7 billion in 2025. Every passive alternative installed is a unit of that product that never gets sold. That is the real silence, not a secret memo in a locked drawer, something colder, 1,000 small omissions. Trade school lessons that skip passive geometry, builder catalogs that jump straight to tonnage, code conversations that talk about compliance before orientation, sales calls that begin with replacement instead of airflow, not because it failed, because monthly dependence pays better. And once you see that pattern, you see why the Amish example matters so much. It is not nostalgia. It is surviving evidence. A community kept using a physical solution that the market had no way to meter every month. That is why these roofs still look invisible to people trained to notice branded equipment and ignore unbranded performance. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to tear up your foundation, rip out your existing system, or buy equipment. You need one thing they already have or can easily get: a weekend. Here is the simplest retrofit path I trust. You start with a 24-inch aluminum roof turbine or a vented cupola opening centered between rafters. Then you cut a weather-sealed throat no smaller than 14 inches by 14 inches below it. Under that, you mount a 12-volt permanent magnet motor or small axial flux generator on a bracket. The shaft must line up cleanly with the vent spindle. You do not force it, you let it spin free. Then you build the air path. On the north or shaded side, you add a 6-inch schedule 40 PVC intake, or two 4-inch runs. They should rise no more than 18 feet from the lower attic edge. Keep the slope near 3% so condensation drains away from the roof opening. Line the hottest roof section with low E radiant foil and flash every penetration with EPDM plus butyl tape, not bargain caulk. EPDM flashing is not optional. Silicone alone causes leaks, wood rot, and winter freeze damage. At the generator leads, use a bridge rectifier, a 10-amp charge controller, and 12-gauge copper wire into a sealed 12-volt battery. Add HDPE insect screen on every intake and exhaust point. If you build a cupola body, use exterior plywood, stainless screws, and either galvanized sheet or painted aluminum for the cap. If you want a thermal boost, slip a 4-inch black stovepipe under the cap as a solar riser. In full sun, that riser runs hotter and pulls harder. Your material costs stay human. A salvage turbine usually runs $28 to $65. A permanent magnet motor lands around $24 to $38. The charge controller costs $17 to $29. Schedule 40 PVC, flashing, foil, wire, and screen, add another $86 to $144. Even if you buy a new turbine, you stay around $182 to $347 total. One Saturday morning gets the vent mounted. A second afternoon handles the wiring. If your roof pitch is between 4/12 and 6/12, you are in the sweet zone. Penn State still recommends it for natural barn ventilation. It keeps moisture moving without stalling warm air. Leave at least a 3-foot overhang if you are building new. If you are retrofitting, make sure your existing soffit path is not packed with insulation. Air has to enter before it can leave. That sounds obvious. Builders forget it constantly. On a 95-degree day, you can see attic air temperatures fall hard. They can drop from 126 degrees to roughly 108 or 104 by late afternoon. That happens if the intake path is clean and the cap turns freely. In a steady summer breeze, the battery will usually sit between 12.8 and 13.4 volts. That is enough for LED lighting, a router, tool charging, sensors, or emergency radios. Requires attention once a year. Oil the bearing if the model needs it. Clear nests, check the flashing. Your conventional attic fan or central cooling upgrade costs $1,200 to $8,400 to install. It costs $64 to $219 per month to run in peak season. It lasts 10 to 15 years before it ends up in a landfill. This costs $182 to $347 total. It lasts 20 to 30 years. Your choice. Before you call it finished, test it like a farmer, not a salesman. Use an infrared thermometer, a strip of tissue, and a stick of incense. Check the roof deck at noon, then check the floor below it. Watch the tissue lean toward the intake and the smoke pull toward the cap. If the smoke stalls, your inlet is too tight or your shaft is dragging. Fix that first, then log the temperatures for 7 days daily. Numbers kill doubt. Watch the spread narrow. The lie about needing a bigger machine falls apart in front of you. Everything I've covered across this channel, root cellar airflow, lime-washed walls, gravity-fed water, I've put it all in one place. Step by step, season by season, room by room, in the order the families actually use it. It does not have a name yet. Link is in the description. But stay here, because what Ruben showed me is the part nobody is talking about yet. Nobody told you, not your builder, not your contractor, not the man who sold you a bigger unit. They sold you replacement instead of design. They sold you monthly dependence instead of structure. And once you see the difference, you cannot unsee it. If you're the kind of person who believes real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside, you already know what to do. You know why it happened. Someone else was protecting profit. Hit subscribe, not for me, for what comes next, because this is not a channel. This is a quiet movement of people who have decided they're done being sold what they already own. I want to hear from you. Drop your state, your hottest attic temperature, or the monthly summer bill you are sick of paying in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers decide what we cover next. Next week, I'm going to show you what a 1946 Penn State document reveals. It shows how to cool a house with nothing but shade cloth, water, and lime. And the internal logic the post-war housing industry used to bury it for decades. You are not going to want to miss that one.